Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me, I have the young 20-something millennial Professor Pixel and the guy formerly known as the Dairy God who ate at title. So I think thinking about starting to call him the Millennial Man from the Midwest or the Midwestern Millennial Man, Dr. V himself. We're looking forward to doing Reacher on Tuesday night, so get ready for that. But in the meantime, we have something very special for you, ladies and gentlemen. And that, of course, with just how awesome Rocky was last week, we decided to continue on with the series. And tonight we're going to be covering Rocky II from 1979, written and directed by Stallone himself. Gentlemen, I'll start off with my initial impressions as people start to fill in here to the stream. I, of course, have gone on record with saying that I think Rocky by itself is a masterpiece, and despite whatever flaws there are, which I did address during the course of last week's stream, few and far between, even from all the major movie critics that have been out there, that it's one of those special movies that if I start watching it, I can't stop. Therefore, I don't want to watch it all the time, but it's nearly flawless. And I explained why, and we debated that. Going forward in the 70s, we mentioned before how Jaws and a few other things like Star Wars, it became the decade where sequels became viable, and then they really overdid them in the 80s, which is great and bad in certain ways. But Rocky 2, to me, that being said, is nearly flawless itself. And in some aspects, I think it surpasses the first movie for what they're trying to do, and I really feel they do a great job of building on it. That being said, I still have to rank Rocky 2 just slightly behind Rocky 1 because without Rocky, you have nothing else. But Rocky 2 is fantastic. I like how Rocky himself is involved a lot more in everyday life things too, and then the fight is in its own stand. So it's basically the same template as Rocky 1. Creed's exceptional. Everything about this movie I think is fantastic. My only complaint a little bit would be a little bit of the score, a little bit of the music. I don't know if it's gets me off as much as the first one did. That being said, we get the birth of the montages. We know it, especially in the 80s TV and films and A-team scenes. But great movie, loved it a lot. As a kid, I don't like it as much, but as an adult, I respect it even more too. So let's go around the horn. Pix, let's start with you first, the young 20-something millennial guy joining us here. Talk about Rocky 2, your initial thoughts.
You gotta love seeing a guy do his best to push through issues. And that's really what this movie boils down to. And I knew I liked it. Admittedly, some of the details got lost along the way, but I knew I liked this movie. And I absolutely agree. It's right up there. It's neck and neck with Rocky for one of my favorites. Carl Weathers, I actually enjoy his performance in this even more. Whereas the first, he's this big guy who's like, oh, look, he's the champ. Okay. Here he is kind of turning into the villain because he's been called a fake, pretty much. He's receiving hate mail, death threats, all sorts of things just because he won by the call of it at the end, because Rocky survived all the rounds. So here it's just showing more and more of Apollo as he's trying to push for this rematch because he wants to prove it for himself and to everybody else. But Rocky, he honestly he needs the money. He can't find work anywhere. And seeing him go through all this to ultimately say, I have to take this fight because I can't do anything else. It's hard to watch, but we can understand it as we're seeing him struggle through his life. And I really do love it.
Nice to hear that. Dr. V, I know you're a big Stallone fan, as am I too. We cover all that kind of stuff on the Extreme Movie Show, and Stallone has got such a great catalog. We've only scratched the surface of it. But when you think of Rocky 2, what are some things you're going to want to talk about tonight? What comes out to you?
Well, Rocky 2, the first thing that stands out to me is I love how this movie just feels like this. It's part of the first movie. It's one giant movie. There's no definitive end to the first one because this takes right after the fight. Yeah. So usually when people do that, the movies that come, the huge movies that come to my mind recently that did that was Infinity Wars and Endgame for Marvel. That was a 2-part story, and that's what this is. This is still one story. You're getting the second part immediately right after that. You're dealing with the aftermath of the fight, below, and then now you're dealing with he's realizing, he's becoming a bum again because he said he wasn't going to fight, tries doing everything, makes him, he ends up just like, I can't do this. The one thing I'm good at, and, he has to deal with this, ups and downs of life now. He's with Adrian, they get getting married. Like I said, it's just a continuation of the first movie that I loved about it. And then the cool thing about this is that, like I said, Stallone directed this. Before this, he had a movie, Paradise Alley, which he directed. It was his first debut, bombed. So the United Artists, people who are in charge of this movies, were reluctant to let him direct. They originally were going to try to get somebody else, but that guy was directing Saturday Night Fever. So Stallone wanted to do it since he wrote it.
Yeah.
So I was reading up who the other guys on here. Aaron, the producers, Robert,
yep.
and Aaron Winkler wanted. They said, you know what, dude? The reason the first movie got off the ground and was such a success because of Stallone's input constantly while they're filming it, because he kept micromanaging everything, and he making changes to the script and stuff like that. And I said, Stallone is the star. It worked the first movie. The guy, let him give another chance, and it turned out to be just as big as the first movie. So, Stallone was the perfect role for this, as far as directing, because I couldn't imagine anybody else directing it. But
I think with Stallone, him, we talk about being the baby project of his and all that too. He's still passionately interested in it, and of course, a lot of what's happening with Rocky, I think, actually mirrors, of course, Stallone at this time, because we see early on the continuation of rounds 14 and 15, and him just being happy that he went the distance, and I Love You with Adrian, which is how the first movie ends. And then we see them, like you say, going right to the hospital, and it's kind of funny to see Apollo going in there. And while Pixel, earlier you said that Creed's kind of like the bad guy in here when you're younger, it's very easy to go good versus evil, white versus black, light versus darkness, so however you look at flip sides of the coin. And to me, what I really like about this film as I get older, like I said, when you use your adult eyes and your life experiences to see it, it takes on a different form. And for me, I thought Creed was fleshed out more. So I want to say that earlier I'd mentioned that on this coming Tuesday we're going to be reviewing season 1 of Reacher here on the Xtreme Movie Show Live, and one of the things that attracted us to it was the physicality of the main actor. When I look at Apollo Creed, I'd mentioned in Rocky, the first movie, that to me it's really impressive. Here's a guy that played NFL football, basically was transitioning to a new role, and Rocky got him off the ground basically. And here's Carl Weathers, phenomenally, incredibly handsome, fit looking male individual. He's a specimen. He is a Greek god. I mean, the name Apollo obviously is a Greek god, right? God of the hunter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he's perfect in this role. And I think he gets fleshed out a lot because boxing, much like tennis, actually was at its heyday in the late 70s through, like, say, the mid 80s. And to see how infectious everybody was about rooting for Rocky reminds me of watching like Hearns and Hagler and everybody else too, growing up as a kid, because I was on HBO all the time. And so I really like it because things really start taking off here in the hospital late at night when everybody leaves. Rocky goes and says, hey, and he goes to Apollo's room and he goes, hey, Apollo, can I ask you something? And he's like, what? And he's like, did you give me your best? He's like, yeah, whatever. It's like, all right, thanks, Apollo. So the way Rocky is, he doesn't hate Apollo.
No.
And he doesn't whatever. But again, he wanted to go the distance. He wanted to do whatever the best is that he could do, which is all that you can do as an athlete, especially in an individual sport. Exactly. And so now going through, it's interesting because, like I say, this movie, about 2 hours long, follows the same template. Even though we know the characters, they spend a good, beginning part of this, first of 3 acts, let's say, of just setting up Rocky's situation and fleshing people out a bit more, because Rocky, now that he's healthy and happy, he goes to the zoo. He proposes to Adrian, which is kind of nice. It's sweet. It's something that was referenced before. So to your point, RDV, it does kind of build on it. But I like this whole opening a bit here too, because it's like, okay, now what? And that's the whole problem with Happily Ever After and feeding kids a bunch of lies when you're younger about things, because it's like, okay, and then what? When you've climbed the mountain, it's twice as hard to stay there, as they say. So, the people you're bad to on the way up are going to beat you up on the way down. And it's like that in sports and life. And we get to see Rocky go through a lot of very humiliating situations because he's functionally illiterate. his friends try to help him out, getting him a job, but because of union rules and just the way the economy was in the 70s, he couldn't stick onto it. He tries to provide for Adrian and be a nice guy now that they're engaged. We find out she's pregnant, and it's a beautiful thing because fighting, he's done what he wanted to do. It's the farthest thing from his mind. He's got other priorities. That means being a husband and a provider. And nowhere does this stand out where she's like, and it's one of the saddest scenes to me, where she goes to take a part-time job, she's pregnant because he can't find work. I mean, it's just a great first third of the movie, and it ignores everything and only peppers a little bit of scenes in there with Creed in there with what's going to come to. I love it. What do you guys think of what's going on here in this first third?
I'll just say this quickly. I know Marania was saying like she didn't like this as saying it's a weaker of the original trilogy. To me, I liked the fact it was more realistic. They right after the fight. Remember, because they're fighting, they're not having. This is full contact. As far as there's no headgear. They only have a mouth guard. So Rocky suffers a detached retina in his eyes. He has to have surgery, and they said you could go blind, so that this scares him, and also because he wants to do right by Adrian, so he retires. And the problem is that he said he goes for life. He wants to be around, to take care of his kid and all that stuff, but he also thinks he feels neutered. He's no matter what he tries, whatever he does, he just can't do it. And he realizes he's like when on an interview, the guy says like, "Well, dude, you're good at fighting. Why don't you fight?" And that's when he starts getting the idea. It's like and Apollo Creed wants a rematch, it's like he wants to go when he wants to finish what he started. He wants to go for the championship. And he's got Mickey's by his side. Mickey's kind of like shows up the door, and you get this tense scene with him, and after him talking to Talia Shire, character Adrian, and she's kind of like, "I don't want you to go. Don't go." And it's like it's really stressful. On their new marriage, they have a baby on the way, and so he ends up leaving to go fighting. And what's really interesting to see is that he's not giving his all, as Mickey calls on, like, where's your gut? And then Paulie had the biggest change. He goes into it, as far as we saw in the first movie. He goes up to Adrian at the pet store. He says, "What are you doing?" It's like, you're messing with his mind. He's gonna get killed out there. I understand you don't want to fight, but he's gonna fight regardless. And if his heart's not into it, he's gonna get injured because he's going there. He's basically like he's not fighting 100%. And then she's like, "I love him. You don't love him." He's like, "Yeah, why don't you go over next over?" And then this course this leads to more drama with the baby coming early. Rocky goes, it's like finally Rocky starts putting his guts into it now after they had a little talking. But I said like this, it's a little soap opera, but it's just real life. It's just stuff that can and what probably has happened before. I'm not gonna say I don't know who, as far as I don't know specific names, but this really grounded it for me. Because if he would have had no consequences going in there and just like, and because Adrian just seemed like the kind of girl that she's afraid. This is her first love. Yeah. This is a serious thing. People die of concussions. The woman who's with the guy offering him a deal, or as soon as he gets hospital, is like, no, at his wedding. She's like, "Oh, what are you gonna do?"
Out of the woodwork.
Yeah. She's like, "Shoot, what are you gonna do?" He's like, "You're gonna do advertisement for concussions?" They're joking about it, and and you can see that probably set into motion more with Adrian's, mindset already. But no, like I said, I love this movie. It's where it falls off for me for Rocky is the third movie with Clubber Lang. That's where it starts to feel less like the first two.
Absolutely, it was a big, huge drop off in quality.
But yeah, I was reading up on this. This was like $7 million. It went in the box office, $200 million.
Yeah.
So it destroyed the box office. I'm curious to see what because it's 1979. What was it going against? Because for being a Rocky movie, it still feels like the first movie, because the first movie was drama. There was soap opera, and that's not as much, but Rocky was all about romance, building, wanting to be a man, going the distance. You know, he's so, and it's still the same in this movie to me. And then we also get to see more Frank. Frank
Yeah,
Stallone.
now Pixel with you, I mean, like I say, sometimes with what we review, it's a first watch for you. I always joke about being the young millennial 20-something because we have such a wide variety of listeners to the show that it's like, I want them to understand that there's somebody like you that represents Generation Z, or whatever the hell you guys call yourselves. And Dr. V, I don't know if technically you're a millennial or not, but that being said, it's three vastly different perspectives on something like that. What was your take on the build-up here in this first act?
I thought it was great. We, like I said before, this whole movie to me is fueled by the champion wanting to prove himself again, and Rocky just wanting to survive, because the first thing he does whenever he finishes with the first fight is, okay, well, let's go ahead and go out on the town. Why not? I'll get a car that I don't even really know how to drive. You want to watch? Oh, we'll get Polly a watch too. And he burns through it like quickly. The money management there was not good, but quickly he finds himself in need of cash once again. And so he's trying to do commercials, can't, tries to do work. Like I said, the economy just didn't allow for it. He was let go everywhere. So all he had was to do this fight. And his heart isn't really in it, though, because you have Adrian, who doesn't want him to do this. She is absolutely against him fighting. What if you go blind? What about all this? And I actually think that Paulie is a lot better in this movie after the fight. He seemed to settle down some, and he does go and he does yell at his sister a little afterwards because Rocky's heart isn't in training.
Like he says, you're going to get him killed.
Yeah, but that's
She
when,
doesn't know.
but that's when complications rise and she sinks down on the floor. They get her to the hospital and she slips into a coma. Rocky is devastated, won't even see the baby yet, because until she's up, he can't function. But that's when eventually she comes out, and after they see the baby, she tells him to go win. And you see Mickey there, who's been at Rocky's side throughout this whole thing, and he's saying, "What are we waiting for? Let's go!" And there comes the training montage. You're built up into that moment. It's excellent the whole way through.
Yeah, I think with Marania in chat, she's mentioning how, drama for drama's sake, and how the whole coma thing and baby was putting her inserted. Absolutely. And to get from point A to point B, you can either have subplots or multiple characters that you're following because it's Rocky centric. I like the fact that, like I said, the fight's last thing on his mind. I don't know if it was intentional in the first movie to have his eye damaged because he's going to have to learn how to fight, instead of being left-handed fighting as a southpaw, to fight right-handed in here, which really can't be done. So we're not talking about how realistic the fighting is or the training here. We're just talking about it from the movie perspective. But to me, I think that is one of the complaints about the film, is because, yes, it is drama for drama's sake. Yes, they intentionally they do slow it down because they're going to get to a point where they're going to get your pulse down to like 40 and 35, where you want to go take a leak, go get another thing of popcorn, before they amp it up and go from 0 to 100 in the last 15 minutes. And so in a way, it does feel a little bit long. I think that's intentional. I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think from the man's perspective, when she comes down and they're talking and they're having an honest conversation, he's like, Adrian, I never asked you to stop being a woman. Because she takes care of the home and the house and the baby, all those traditional roles. She goes, I don't never ask you to stop, having me stop being a man, because he wants to fight, but he doesn't want to upset her because he loves her so much. And while that seems a bit schmaltzy especially by today's standards, for strong, independent woman, rah, 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 and all this crap, especially from a Catholic Italian family in the 70s back then, absolutely, that's hardcore. That's as realistic as it gets. So I like it because they do have a home. They do have each other, do have a baby on the way. Rocky's just fallen himself in this position where that's the only way he can be a man not to himself anymore, because he's done that in the first movie. How can he be a man in society? How can he be a provider, which is what we associate with being a man, being functional? And that is, he feels like he's being forced to fight. And on the flip side, I wanted to bring up what you mentioned something earlier before, Pixel, about Creed. I talked about just how great he looks and all that too. Yes, his handlers tell him that if he goes through this intimidation, a smear tactic to get Balboa in the ring, he's going to be painted as a bad guy. But bottom line is he just wants to know, as from one fighter to another, that he can beat him. And the best scene to me, and I tweeted it out earlier, was the one with, we find out, I think it's Tony is his trainer, right? Or is it Duke? Whatever. Tony, I think. He's sitting there with his handlers and all that, and he says, "What did you think?" And it's a great scene. It's so well acted, because it's like, "Hey, champ, I think you need to look at this scene from, Rocky 1, where he's like, yeah, I'm looking at everything," and he really doesn't. We see him, watching Rocky punch the meat, and here he gets a little bit more screen time, where he says, "This guy's all wrong for us," and then he kind of slowly, on the personal level, this is awesome scene. It's beautiful the way it's shot. He walks up to Apollo, who's sitting behind his desk. Everybody else is way behind him, and he kind of leans over and he whispers. He goes, "Look, this guy came at you like no man I've ever seen before, and you beat him. And you beat him so bad. I've never seen a being like that." And he kept coming back. And then he leans even more forward, and he's not blinking, and he looks at him man to man, eye to eye, soul to soul. And this is a guy bonding thing. Again, it's not sexist. Women aren't going to get it. He goes, "We don't need a man like that in our life. He's all wrong for us." He goes, "I know what you're feeling. Let it go." And you know what? That is absolutely 100% mentally the right decision. It's the smart play. Everybody does it too smart. But what I love is Apollo goes, I won, but I didn't beat him. And he goes, "Thank you for being honest with me. Okay, set up. We're going to go ahead and do it." Because Apollo himself as a man has to know, I'm not really a fighter if I can't beat this guy, so I have to do it. And I love it, because he's portrayed as a bad guy for basically trying to shame Rocky into fighting back, and Rocky feels like he has to do it for the money. It's fine. It's not as overblown as what boxing has become over the past 40 years. Not nearly as popular as it was back in the 80s. But I just think it's absolutely awesome. As a kid, it didn't really register with me much, or a lot of the slow stuff with Adrian. But as a man, being older and a provider, I think this is a home run way to do it. And I understand some people won't like it, but I think it's 100% perfect for what it needs to be. The spam bots are definitely out there too. It's like, "Hey, yo, what's going on?"
I want to point out real quickly. I want to piggyback on your thing about Tony. Phenomenal actor. When Creed's in the ring with Rocky at the end, and he sees that he's like that Rocky's starting to like what he's doing. He's wearing the champ out. He's like, "You can get away from him. He's gonna kill you." I just love his facial reactions. He really sells it, because he knows that's what to me makes Rocky even more dangerous in the ring. When he starts hyping him up, is when you see Tony just like reacting. He's like, "Oh my gosh!" Yeah. It's like, exactly. "Get out of there! He's gonna murder you! Get out! Get out!" And you see Creed getting the body blows and stuff. It's just like, I love that supporting acting from him. That is just phenomenal. I love it. I also want to point out too another thing. When we see Rocky when he's doing the sparring later on, when he's training, the little guy he's fighting with, the little partner. That's he's a real life. He's a boxing champion, Roberto Duran. So they actually have someone.
Duran, Hands of Stone.
Yeah.
Huh. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, this is a sparring partner. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if with the first movie with the eye injury with the whole southpaw thing, I don't know if that was intentional or they just built off of it, because the idea of switching from one hand to another sounds nice. It's not practical, I think. And I'm certainly not a boxer, but as a coach, I've talked to enough people that have done some fights and stuff, and I think the biggest thing here with the movie is it's great entertainment, but it's not particularly realistic in terms of boxing. So we're not really trying to talk about these films from the boxing perspective, especially the training and how Mick is, and we love Mick and all that, but that's not how it goes when you're really training somebody. You're not yelling and screaming. That's one of the beautiful parts about coaching, or like Mickey, is that people that want to do something come to you, so they have that self-interest, and therefore they're automatically going to do stuff. But I don't know if Sugar Ray Leonard was I think he was middleweight boxer, maybe 155, whatever. He had a problem with detached retina. I know he used to host on shows, but then he came out and he did a few fights in the 80s, and I hated him because he would shuck and jive and move around. And the few fights I saw him, I hated it. And I always liked Hearns was phenomenal. And so as a kid, watching all this stuff, it was like, I don't know what's going on, but the rules and of course the Rocky movies, it's like boxing was definitely a big time thing. I'm not saying it's not now, but now we have MMA and other things too. So we have a lot of different fighting sports that capture people's attention, and boxing certainly, like I say, doesn't have the gist of it. But Pixel, you brought up a scene earlier that I got to touch on because it was the essence of the thumbnail that I sent out with it, and I call it the win speech. Eric Breen knows it. He's commented on it. Everybody knows it. And, I like how Mickey decided, hey, Rock, I don't want to get mad in a biblical place like this when they're in church, when they're praying for her recovery. He's like, but you got an opportunity here. Not many people get a second chance. He goes, you still got to do it. So, what good's basically going to be for you to mope around or whatever? Because, but you know what? Adrian's a good woman. I'll sit here with you. And if we don't do anything, I'll just be by your side. So it's a nice show of faith that he got. And you just see Mickey not really saying anything and shutting his mouth because it can be a bit overbearing how he is, which is good. But when he goes to and he's like, hey, Adrian, I was thinking, maybe if I didn't fight Apollo, I could still help, but we'll be okay. He's just trying to reassure his wife because he's there. He's reading the dumb stories. Edward Goodrice Burroughs isn't probably a dumb story. I'm wondering if it was Tarzan he was reading, but the rhymes and all that kind of silly stuff. But Adrian's best line and only role was when she opens her eyes and they got the baby and she's like, you look tired. And she's not looking at him. She says, Rocky, here's just one thing I want you to do for me. And he's like, yeah, what? And she's like, when? He's like, what? When? And then it hit that bell. At that point, I'm uncontrollably, I'm not crying like moaning, like my dog died. The tears come down every friggin' time. And there's very few movies that can do that. And it's perfect because no matter what happens, it's I think the ultimate sign of love and respect from the male's perspective. Exactly. She is in his corner, literally and figuratively. She's the mother of his child. Everything is okay. She knows he's done everything he can to try to not fight. So she realized that, to your point, RDV with Paulie basically kind of reading her the right act, saying, hey, you're going to get him killed. Yeah. She didn't seem like she didn't really know it. Like she wasn't playing games. That's just how she felt. So when she got out of the coma and everything was okay, she gave Rocky her permission to do something and gave him what he needed because he's not himself anymore. He's now a provider, and things are different when you put that ring on a lady's finger, if it's a genuine relationship, let me say. And so once you hear that bell ring and then you get this training montage, I think the training montage is actually kind of whatever, but it really picks up when the kids start running and all that too. So let me ask you to kind of comment on that, and then we'll go over to RDV for that.
What? I'm sorry.
What the hell are you watching? You're rubbing one out. What's going on here? He's looking at
Jack Reacher.
I was reading what Marani was saying, and I kept thinking about the dominant hand thing, and I actually disagree because once we talked about the final fight, I can say why. But
I will tell you, being a left-handed person that went to some private schools where they would smash me on my hand with a wood stick if I didn't use my right hand. I've been forced to try to change hands, and I have a couple friends that are the exact same way, the way we grew up. So being a southpaw, you can't do it. There is something to be said for when you're younger, but generally the majority of the population being right-handed, everything's built for a right-handed world. So as a lefty, you get in accidents more and all that. But I will tell you that as somebody that when I deal with a bunch of young children, some as young as 3, and training them in sports, that they want to try to change hand experiments. It's like, no, we have to decide what hand they're going to be and do them that way. We don't do this back and forth crap. If you start to play a sport, and you're throwing right-handed, but then you try to do something that's similar to that left-handed, it doesn't work. I've known a few exceptions to the rules over the years, but that's exactly what they are. And I will say this, if nothing more, Pixel, the whole thing with the training montage that I was asking you about was, it sounds nice in theory, but unless that's something you've practiced for 4, 5, 6 years and you're young, it's not going to work. And the younger, because you have a more supple brain when you're younger, so that's the best time to learn music, to learn languages, to learn motor skills. But Rocky's a hack. He had only been doing it for a while. He's 30, 31. There's no way he can try to actually do something at an elite level with the best in the world and be successful at it, even though it's the film. Realistically, that's just how it is. But Pixel, I was asking about the training montage. I thought the training montage was at its best when it looked more when it had all the kids in it, actually, and them follow them and everything else there too. It's an extended
Yeah.
montage. But what did you take about all this build up for the fight?
No, I mean the build up to the fight it's just as epic, if not more, to the previous film, because you have the crowd, all of Philly there is supporting Rocky. When they get to the fight, I've never seen so many Italians in one place. I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Yeah, that was definitely not. It's a great line, and it was not racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever word you want to use back then. It's true. All the Italians were out. Just like in the first movie. Well, I know if he can't fight, I know he can cook.
But yeah, no. All the build up to that fight, and it you feel it, and you get there. You're on the edge of your seat. You want Rocky to win, no matter what, because he's your main man, and it's
because no one cares about Creed.
Well, RDB, let me bring up a phrase of something that I want to explain, and I know you're wanting to comment on something here. The all-time best athlete in any sport ever in American history, and I think it's not even debatable, and I'm just saying this because I've got to get off my chest, and I'm being dead serious when I say this, is Wilt Chamberlain. From the University of Kansas, phenomenal athlete. He was a physical freak and the best basketball player of all time. Michael Jordan doesn't even come close. I love Larry Bird. I love Kareem. I'm partial to centers and guards. I just love basketball. But Wilt Chamberlain himself had a quote that I thought was phenomenal. He said, "Nobody roots for Goliath." And you're absolutely right, RDB. Nobody cares about Creed. But, to kind of piggyback on Pixel talking about how he's portrayed as a bad guy, which is true, I want you to comment on whatever you want to say. But I think the whole idea of nobody wants to root for the champ because you've got there. Everyone likes the underdog because why? That's the story. And so it's really, really hard to root for that person, right? So they got to be the heat generator, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what were you wanting to comment on?
First, I want to say to your previous comment you just said, I just want to say you're wrong. Kurt Hennig is the best athlete. He's the perfect athlete for everything.
He had a perfect gimmick. I will agree with you because that's what it was, a gimmick.
Lies. No, I was going to say about the whole thing with makes sense having the kids throwing in there because it really shows you that Philadelphia is behind Rocky. Like, he's the hometown hero. Everybody kind of looked at him at first he's just some guy, he's gonna get his butt kicked. But then when they saw him go the distance with Creed in the first movie, they're like, oh my gosh, this guy's real. That's what everybody wants. He's a nobody who from Philly, he's not that bright, but dude went the distance. And so now everybody's behind him, and you saw how he was acting in the interview. With the press conference with Creed next to him. Creed's getting all hot headed and stuff, and Rocky's not trying to be mean like that, but he's not. He's happy to be fighting, He doesn't get that game mode. He doesn't get serious. He doesn't get all that stuff. He's just happy to have the chance. Here's a key. He's getting a rematch. Did he really want? Did he really want it at first? Not really. He's content. So he's cracking little jokes. Where Creed is the one his pride's hurt, and it shows. Definitely shows. That's why people are making cracks at him, even the reporters. So I love the fact that they really sell Rocky, as the most lovable person there is, because that's what he was in the first movie, even before he fought Creed. And you can see that his personality has changed. He even says to his wife, he says, Adrian, I'm not going to change. You're not going to change. I'm not going to change. We are perfect the way we are, so we got more money. We're going to be all right. No matter what happens, and that stays true. I mean, no, in the beginning of the movie, yes, he does. He goes out, gets the tiger jacket, and then he gets the Trans Am.
Come on.
Yeah. It's like, drive? He's like, sure, yeah, stop, go. I mean, they're in it for comedy.
There's a police squad thing of running into the trash cans.
Yeah.
Gets me every time.
So like I said, this movie, really sells the underdog and really keeps the underdog going too, because they could have changed him. He could have acted, became more like kind of like Creed is, and Creed's, he in the first movie he's like, oh yeah, he's all about him, all about celebrity. He became more of a celebrity than a boxer. And Creed was starting to, when he got humiliated, he felt, he needed to prove, to everybody, hey, I'm not a joke. I'm not a one-time fluke. I can still go and I'll put this guy down. He's like, I'll put him down with 2 rounds. Didn't. So like I said, this is very good writing by Stallone. And people do make cracks about Stallone, like, expendables. Oh yeah, it's not that great and stuff. It's like Stallone does when he's on something, he's hot. When he made some bad movies, sure, he's made some bad movies. Not a lot bad movies. The guy knows what he's doing, and like I said, this is like the 1979, so you're getting a lot of that scenery. I love the fact the whole Rocky series takes place in Philadelphia. Him running up the steps, all that stuff. He's just everyday average Joe. He's there were a lot of guys like that who weren't that bright. They went into the military. That's what they did. Not everybody could afford to go to school. We don't know if he even went to school or if he dropped out.
He was a high school dropout.
Yeah, there was a comment about him not.
Oh, was there a comment? Okay,
yeah.
I forgot.
Yeah,
I must have missed that.
one.
Yeah, because and that was a common thing. I have aunts.
Yeah,
and they dropped out.
Yeah,
but like I said, I just want to say real quick. I love the fact that they said they turned this into him just wanting to prove that he is, is a man. And then I love the fact it shows that his wife, no matter no matter what goes on, he has a final say, and she still loves him, supports him. That's the nuclear family. Today is when she would have divorced him. Or she would, or she would have left.
Speaking of wives, before we talk about the fight and finishing up with our final thoughts, it was interesting because Creed's wife, we see her a couple of times where he's reading all the hate mail, and she's like, "Wouldn't you rather be playing with the children?" And the correct answer is, "Hell no! I've got something I have to do." And the male brain is singularly focused on stuff too, where we cut everything out when we get into it, and that's the problem that Rocky had. That's the problem that Apollo Creed wants to put himself into, because he can't move forward as a man for his family either, despite the fact he's heavyweight champion of the world.
Yep.
Got a lot of money and everything else there too. So they're both flip sides of the same coin, which does get explored in 3, which I think is kind of interesting. I will say this about the fight a little bit, kind of just piggybacking off of Wilt Chamberlain, because it's very rare that I get an opportunity to plug him. But there's some merit to it, because I can't emphasize enough. I've done a lot of coaching on the side, and it's something I still do to this day in a couple different sports. And I'm thinking of a tennis player who won a major. I had the opportunity to go to a clinic that this person was putting on, and the person's name was Roscoe Tanner. He won, I believe it was the 1979 Australian Open. He had the biggest serve in tennis, about 140, 150 miles an hour, which today you'll average, 120, 130 if you're a top guy, and he had it with a wooden racket. So it'd be even bigger today if he had today's technology. And he's a guy that's not too much bigger than me or whatever, but he was doing a serving clinic. And so there's a few of us coaches there and a few select players that got to go or whatever. And so I never played on a pro tour or anything like that at all. So to go on the other side of the fence of a guy that's got a little bit of a beer gut, he's a tennis hack himself. I will say this: he has a lot of personal issues, but when he's always very charismatic. But he's a lot like anybody that's great at something. You're not like Rocky. You have a certain mentality that borders on psychotic because of what you need for it, and that's well documented. How a lot of athletes, despite their talent level, mentally can't handle real life, because real life to them is not that. Because as a kid, talent sticks out. People notice it. You get involved into a world that sees potential for it because there's a lot of power behind it. And the same thing goes with young women in beauty, or young men in beauty for that matter. We'll talk about that with Reacher a little bit on Tuesday night. So talking with Roscoe Tanner about it, I basically said, hey, look, you can still do this at your old age too. I said, if a good college player come in and would play a couple games, would be able to take a game or two off. He goes, well, if he got hot. He said, but no. And it's the same thing that John McEnroe, my personal idol, said a few years ago about Serena Williams. And John McEnroe is almost 60 years old, and Serena is considered by many to be the best female tennis player of all time. I disagree. I still think it's Steffi Graf. And he goes, no, I'd beat her now. And it's amazing because I've hit with college level women and people with women on the pro tour myself. And I go, wow, there's such a huge difference. But unless you're out there and you know it and you can feel it and you can see it and you're around it, you can't tell. And that's why I say here with the fight at the end and plug in Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain gets talked about just like Tony's talking about Rocky and how everybody's talking about, Creed in here. And it's true. There's absolutely no way in hell Rocky would have a chance, I think, in the second fight to win, despite the fact that he's a southpaw because he fights right hand. No way. And the reason why I bring this up is because it's a bit of a brutal fight. The commentators even mention about, despite the fact that all the fans are behind him, Creed's in the best shape of his life. Creed outweighing him by 20 pounds. Creed looked, I thought, phenomenal. And Rocky looks great, and he's got the heavy hands. We get it. But I think not really a fight being a focus of the first movie. I felt it was a bit more in this one because Rocky has to win it and for the story to continue. That's another reason why I put Rocky 1 ahead of this one, because at least 1 was kind of believable. This one definitely is not to me. That being said, it's a very happy ending, which is what we want, but I know there's a lot of reasons why people like 1, 2, 3, 4 and how we order them and all the others. But for me, it's just a bit of a drag because, yeah, we know Stallone's not, he's an actor. He's not, I don't want to say he's not an athlete because he's an animal. He works out hard, but it doesn't mean you're an athlete. And you can tell he's not a real boxer. And you can tell with the editing, especially on the high def stuff, that the punches aren't landing. I thought in this fight, guys, that the fight was a lot worse. I mean, it wasn't even close, and there's a bunch of bad overdubs of them kind of talking a little bit to each other. That being said, I thought it was shot well, like it's entertaining. I don't lose my interest in all that too, but I think once the fight starts, the movie's over. So I think it starts off great, gets to a high point with the win, but after the montage, I'm ready to walk out of the theater. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just that's the reality of it. So I'm curious how you guys thought this movie would finish up, particularly with the fight or with anything else.
I mean, personally, I disagree. I like the fight. I like it to the very end where they're trying to get up at that end point, and it seems like Creed is going to be standing still, but he ends up getting right to the top and then slumping down because he can't take it anymore. And that's when Rocky gets up, and that call it's everything we've been waiting for.
I was gonna say they're evenly matched. That's why I was like, just by fluke, Rocky was able to stand up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I say, it's great for the story, but I don't know. Well, I said a lot about it, so I'm just trying to shut up and listen to you guys and see what y'all have to think about it.
That's not the first.
It was a longer fight, I thought too.
Well, as I say, I think it's Rocky 3 where he's training with Creed and they both knock each other like one of them around, and they both fall on the mat at the same time. Double punch.
That's the ending scene, I think, of Rocky 3. Ding, bang, and then they both punch. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, like, they're very evenly matched, and that's what they've always tried to prove. That you said they're two sides of the same coin. Both want to go the distance. Both are cocky. Both, want to prove, that they're the best. Creed has ego problem more so than Rocky. Rocky's kind of more grounded, but Rocky, when he gets in the ring, though, he's like, it's all about the fight, nothing else. Where Creed's kind of like showing off a little bit, that's kind of their personality. Those are slightly different. That's why I was like, I like the fact that the way it ended, with Rocky getting up, if Rocky would have landed a knockout 1, 2, 3, I don't think it'd have much more of an impact. The stories why, because he was landing a lot of blows, and realistically, like all those blows to the ribs.
First round would be stopped. Rocky. Yeah, I mean,
because you're seeing Creed like getting all those rib gut shots. I'm like, he's got internal bleeding. There's no way. There's no way. Because they're showing up because when they do the slow motion stop and goes, and you hear the blow, you see it go. I'm like, yeah, he's dying. He's no way going 3 or 4 rounds. He's gonna be wincing, trying to breathe, spitting out blood. Yeah. So and that's but I say for filming though, I do love the slow motion though. it does really add to the suspense. And then like it's just the blows when you hit somebody, you see them, the slow motion, their face turns, you see their lips, then you see the blood spit. I love that. That's just, to me, that's just manly.
I hate bringing stuff from future films into this film, but it's one of the best quotes in the whole series to me. And I think it's in the third film when Clever's training them, and and, you know, you talk about the private fight they have at the end that gets referenced later in some movies. I love it because Apollo says, Rocky, you got to understand something that's really important. I'm going to tell you. You got to remember one thing. He's like, yo, what's that, Apollo? And he's like, you fight great, but I'm a great fighter. And I always think of that every time I watch a Rocky movie. I don't care what it is. And it's true. You know, Apollo's the fighter. Apollo's the champion.
He is.
And even though in 3 he had 10 title defenses, and to meet somebody that was like him in Clubber, that's nice and all that. But really the story's over to me at that point. You know, it's just...
Rocky does... Rocky is just... He's a punching bag. He can absorb so many blows where, you know, that's why he's able, you know, that's his whole gimmick. He wears the other guy out. He wears him out. He even repeats this again in Rocky 4. You see him doing this. You know,
Speaking of gimmicks, I'm glad you brought that analogy up, because when you listen to the Xtreme Movie Show, you can't help but think of our Chuck Norris from Tuesday nights when we do our kicking it, we do our action stuff there too. Because if you think of Chuck Norris and what's the movie we talked about with him in it? The title escapes me, where science created him. Now Chuck Norris must destroy him. And it's the one about the guy that has the regeneration stuff in him. And so he has to kill him. And he doesn't really do it. He just coming back.
Deadly Science?
Silent Rage. Is what it is. And that's what I think about when I think of Rocky. I'm like, no. You know, you can have a broken nose. You can have a busted eye, a broken orbital bone, all these kinds of things too. But, you know, 13 rounds in, when you're like, come on, hit me, Creed, come on. It's like, oh boy. And I keep going, okay, this must have been the basis for Silent Rage, and it works. Pixel, please say something.
I mean, something. No. I think...
Don't be sacrilegious, bro.
I've said what I'm going to say about the fight. The only thing that I could say now is that I feel that it is earned. I feel that, and I can understand the fight is way overblown. They wouldn't take as many hits as they would, but still, when you're watching it, you're going through it, you are pushed to your own limit while you're seeing the blows they take. And then for that end, he's pulled up. He gets to say, well, besides this, and the night my kid was born, this is great. This is the greatest night of my life. And then he gets into that mic and he gets to say, yo, Adrian, I did it. That's perfect ending.
Well, that's that's 83 when they tell you to push it to the limit. So that's a few years from now.
Shut up.
For those who know Scarface. Yes.
Well, here's the thing. I'll ask you these two questions individually for our final thoughts, because I'm curious about this. First, and you can answer them, of course, in any order. But right now with the two films, and we'll cover Rocky 3 next Sunday night, how would you rank them? You know, is 1, you know, the best movie? Is 2 the best movie? How would you rank the two of them so far? And the second question is, and I'm being serious when I say this, does this movie make you tear up or cry? And if so, what scene or scenes? RD, why don't you go first?
I'm gonna say what I guess repeat what you said earlier. This movie, I love the first movie. It's always gonna be the first movie that I love it, story wise. Okay. This is gonna come in second so far, because we're only reviewing the first two. So right now, this is in second place compared to the first movie.
So 1, 2 is 1, 2.
The scene that made me kind of like, you know, tear up is the fact that as at the end where, you know, Adrian, you know, he wins. The guy finally achieved his dream. You know, he kept at it. You know, he originally gave up. You know, but then he's like, he pursued it, and you know, just the beating, you know, the struggle, everything he had to do, and he won. You know, and his wife, you know, still supports him. And like, you know, that's the dream. You know, we.
Doesn't get any better than that, does it?
Yeah. Everybody has a goal they want to get achieved, and then the fact that, you know, you're going like I said, that I love it. We've always said, from this movie, you're willing to go the distance. That is such the greatest quote I've ever known. Like, I just want to go to the distance. Prove that you can do it. And then when you finally prove that you can do it, and then, and the fact you still have someone in your corner, that you love, adds more to it. And it's just a sweet feeling, it's just awesome. So the ending for me is always, even the first movie, I like it all. It's the underdog story, most people, they don't ever achieve their dreams. They go to set out, either they give up or they die before they get their dream. So these movies are inspiring.
They are. What about you, Pixel? And I always joke on you being young 20-something, so maybe this crying emotion you're unaware of because only women do it. But
Healing
what do you
emoji.
think? I mean, again, how would you rank them? And does this make you weep?
No, it doesn't make me weep. I have to admit, I feel
heartless.
Everything. No, not heartless. It's just it's hard.
I'm a doctor. I know what I'm talking
cry,
about.
Okay, but but I'm able to feel what they're going for, and you're absolutely right. The win is something that gets you that moment.
You didn't cry, so you don't feel anything.
But really, to me, that moment is when they are all running after him. The music is amping up, and you can hear the children choir along with it.
Yeah,
but it's right there on top of those steps. I don't think there's a more powerful image that I can think of in movie history at this moment than that.
That's an extreme take, sir.
I just want to say real quickly, it's all common knowledge that the third movie is when we get Eye the Tiger song, but these two movies prove we don't need that song for it to be a great movie. Yes, the Eye the Tiger does get you amped up, but these are totally two different movies than what you're going to see in 3 and 4. They are just raw emotion. So they didn't need a cheap Survivor song to get you amped up. I won't lie. It's a great song. If you're working out, you gotta have that on. It's gotta be on your playlist, no matter what. If you don't have your playlist, get out of the gym, poser.
Eye of the Tiger's a bit tame, but we'll get to that next.
Oh, it's not tame, bro.
No, for me,
someone's got tiger envy.
Well, I'm the Tiger King. So anyway, I watched it today, a few hours ago, actually, and I was by myself with my dogs, and so I'm watching it and I'm chilling out, and it's here in Central Florida. It was a balmy 55, 60 degrees, overcast, slight rain, and all that too. Typical winter day for us and all that, but certainly nothing what Rocky had to experience in his cold Philly winters. But for me, the best thing about this film to me is that I still think one is best. I hate saying this, and I'm going to say it to be a dick about it, but I always say it when people go, well, this is 1A and this is 1B, like they're that friggin' close. But they really are to me, because, like what Ed's saying here in chat, it's genius that, basically 2 was demanded because 1 was, needed to see him win, because people want to see that arc, where he's basically turning into a god and is by the third movie. But for me, I when I say cry or I say weep, I'm sitting there watching it. I know what's going to happen, and I'm just feeling it develop. And I'm not feeling like the movie's got me. Like, I'm not going like, yeah. I'm just watching it going, okay, Adrian's okay.
I don't sob. I mean,
I don't either. But
you can feel it though.
Starts, and then 1 or 2 come down, and then a right eye joins in, and then I kind of dry up, and I'm like, okay, I don't need a tissue or anything like that at all. I'm not snotty or anything at this point. But then, to Pixel's point, when they do the training montage and a kids choir comes in and they're running, I'm like, that's really nice. All these kids, everybody's supporting that. That's like the scene where he's running down the vegetable alley, I call it, from the first film. They do it here, and it's like, yeah, that's really great. That's real. Things like that do happen. But then at the fight too, RDV, I got to sit there and say, the whole, I did it is really, really nice too. But for me, it's the win scene every effing time. Win. I mean,
true story though. Every one of those kids.
Movie after that.
True story. Every one of those kids are actually Rocky's kids. He got around. He's the Italian stallion.
I'll comment on Mariah's thing, and then we'll call it a night. Just talk about Bill Conni's music highlights the action. It does. It's there, and it does what music is supposed to do, and that's not everyone it's supposed to enhance. It's not supposed to take over, which unfortunately I think Mig did in a couple scenes. I really liked Summer of Madness in the first one, Late at Night with Rocky. It's just a beautiful piece, and I was hoping to have something like it in the second film, but you don't get it, and it's okay. And we do see, Bud Kiss and Cuff and Lincoln Animals, which is nice too, because he really owned them. So yeah, great movie. I'm glad we got a chance to spend some time talking about it. It's awesome. I'm really looking forward to next week when we get really extreme for the 80s and talk about Eye of the Tiger, Clubber Lang, Hey Woman, you're looking mighty fine, all that kind of stuff that I thought was fantastic.
I pity the fool who doesn't watch that movie and watch our review.
Yeah, so guys, check it out. We'll be doing it live, 7 o'clock. Getting a lot of retweets for the Rocky. I'm hoping that a lot of people are joining in and checking it out, listening to it. To me, I go, if the Rocky movie can't pull a Chuck Norris, then nothing can beat Chuck Norris, because that's the real test. And our Chuck Norris has been definitely by far our most popular
need
series
Rocky
of films
versus
that we've
Chuck.
done.
Yep.
Well,
That's
that's
it.
coming
That's the
in
next
a
one.
couple months where we're going to do that. But Chuck always wins, but then Rocky does too. So I don't know what we have. A stalemate, perhaps. Find out next week here on Extreme Movie Show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Rob, alongside Pixel and Dr. V. I'd like to thank you guys for coming, sharing your thoughts about this movie and how passionate you are. Check out 3, rewatch it. We're definitely going to go over it. It's definitely an extreme movie. We're going to have a lot of fun. For everybody involved here, have a good night. Stay extreme. 3 went
Yo,
Hollywood,
Adrian.
just like Hollywood, buddy. That's right.
I did it. I did it,
Understood.
Adrian.
It's the ultimate nail. Hey, yo, you got a big mouth.